Hey all, Brad here with Brief Creative. If you know anything about me, you know that I love watercoloring. I rarely have time for it though. I made one watercolor 3 years ago, and that was about the last time I watercolored. It took about probably a full solid 2 weeks to paint this painting, and I'm hoping that I can do some things to make this painting go a lot faster this time around. I'll be painting a similar subject, and along the way I'll just have a bunch of really useful tips for you to get your watercolors to stand out and pop and really be really cool watercolors. Check it out. Well, you can't start anything off in life with a dull pencil. That's probably not true, but it sounded good, okay? The goal here is just to keep your lines nice and light so that they can be erased nice and easily and you're not marring the paper. I like to work with a 4H pencil, but that's just me. For ease, I'm semi-tracing the outside shape just to get my proportions spot on. Obviously, you don't need to do this and you can do it the hard way, but this is a watercolor video, not a sketching video. And my marks are so light that you can really barely even see them on the camera anyways, so yeah. It didn't take long to get everything laid out, and here it is. I'm just going to fast forward through the rest of the sketching and show you all what it looked like when I'm ready to start painting. And here we are, we got all the inside stuff laid out. The one thing I did forget here is I usually leave some white space by just like circling a couple little areas on the painting where they want to be, but I'll do that later. I'm using my Pride and Joy, a number 6 sable brush. It's a really, really nice brush, and I highly recommend a nice brush if you're going to get into watercolor like this. One mistake that I see people make a lot is just not being patient enough. They'll be too excited to start a project and just jump right into adding pigment. Wetting the paper with clear water and letting it dry 90% of the way can really help to smooth out future washes and make your job so much easier. So I mentioned white space. I have this image that I'm loosely basing this painting on, and I'm highlighting certain areas that have a reflection that I want to keep clear of any pigment. I'm also sloping my painting surface with an eraser to let gravity help me out. Please don't watercolor on a flat surface. It can take away the dynamic quality of a painting really fast if you don't. Now I've got this handy dandy color chart that first off was just really good practice, but also is really helpful to see what colors I want to go with. Don't always trust the color on the paint tube because sometimes it's just dead wrong. So here's my color choices. It's kind of a muted palette besides the reds, but don't worry, we are going to get some awesome colors out of them. We're starting out with the bottle color, and what I like to do is pre-mix 3 different shades of the same color so that I have a nice smooth gradient from the light to dark. Notice that I'm not using my nice brush to mix all the colors. If you use the brush that you're painting with to mix all your colors, you may get little pockets of pigment stuck in them that come out when you're painting, and that looks really bad sometimes. So what I'm doing is splitting this painting into thirds. Since bottles are round, the light is going to be different based on where the light source is. My light source is up and to the left, so the bottle's left side will be the lightest and the darkest will be on the right. I'm still starting off this wash with clear water at the top, and I'll gradually add pigment as I go down. This may seem very light, and I promise it will get darker, but building up layers of paint is really important, and it really helps to smooth out a painting. These lighter layers also help to build some muscle memory and gets you used to the painting layout. If you do make a mistake on these first few layers, it's a lot easier to cover up a light mistake than a dark one. It's also really helpful to center yourself a little bit before painting with some deep calming breaths or whatever helps to calm you down. When you paint in a rush, you're going to make mistakes, which will make you more impatient and will cause you to make even more mistakes. If you sense yourself getting annoyed or frustrated at any point during the painting, sometimes it's best to just walk away for a minute, refocus, and come back to it instead of painting when you're angry. That's a lesson I've definitely learned the hard way. While I let the brown dry, I'm just going to come in with some reddish brown to get the label color a little bit. Let's hit pause really quick. The way I currently have this bottle shaded, it's as if the light was coming directly from the left side, which it's really coming from the left and behind me. So I need to show some shadow on that far left edge, which I'll get by sloping my paper in the opposite direction. This will also help it read more as a 3-dimensional object, but make sure your paint is fully dry before doing this next layer. So clear water over the brown until I get to that far left edge, then I'll start to throw some darker pigment down so that my main highlight is kind of 2/3 the way through the painting. Another thing is that watercolor always dries lighter than what it looks like when you first put it down and it's still wet. So be bold with your colors, don't make dull little watercolors. Speaking of bold colors, we're finally starting to see some nice color on our painting. I'll get to the point where I'm really just using straight pigment, not mixed with any water, for my shadows. The darkest portion here is kind of like a sludge of pigment and water, so it's a nice thick layer, and it'll help us a lot with our shading. And there we have it. It's starting to look like a bottle. Honestly, I wasn't super thrilled with this layer, and it kind of got splotchy on me, and I really didn't think it looked that glassy. So I took a little break for a little bit, and when I got back to it, I was able to fix a lot of my mistakes and come at it with a clearer head, which really helped. But before I call it quits for the day, I'm going to throw a little bit of a light layer on the white label area. Even though it is white, it does have a little bit of a shadow, and details like this really help your painting to read as not flat. It's now officially day 2, and I'm coming in with some reds. Yes, brown matter is a red, even though it is called brown matter. In fact, it's going to be the primary color that I use for this super bright, vibrant red ribbon and wax. Similar to the brown, I'm going to be layering up my red in 2 or 3 layers to get it nice and smooth. And then I'll just come in with some straight pigment and hit the dark spots. I try to avoid adding gray or black for shadow lines because it can sometimes flatten your painting. I like to instead either use straight pigment or a darker shade or a cousin of that color. Like if the object being shaded were blue, I would consider using like a dark purple or something like that for the shading. Now, in all honesty, I was a little bit nervous about this ribbon. I've only done one ribbon before and it really didn't turn out that great, but I've learned a lot since then, and look how good that turned out. The key here was just to study the bottle and the way the light was hitting it to see how each strand of ribbon was being affected by the light. Between that and keeping my paper relatively dry for the ribbon, that was my recipe for success. Now for this wax seal, I want it to be super shiny, so I have left a bunch of white space on it, so hopefully that will go a long way. Again, just studying the shadows and then planning out your layers ahead of time instead of rushing into it was how I got this wax to look so good. I have switched to a smaller brush for these details. I could use my bigger brush, but it's just so much easier with a smaller one. The guy who taught me actually said that the better you become at watercolor, the less brushes you'll need, and that's 100% true. I'm super happy with the seal and ribbon, so since I have the red still out, I am going to do some of the small details of the wording really quick. Letters are my least favorite thing about watercolor, especially lighter letters, where you have to paint around all of them, like the Grand Marnier on the big label, but that's okay, I'll get through it. I finally mustered enough confidence to jump back into the brown glass color. It needs a lot more definition, so I'll be adding some streaky shadows, some highlights, some small dark shadows in some places. I need to add the liquid line at the end too, so that it's not just an empty bottle, because no one wants an empty bottle of Grand Marnier. This stuff is too good for that. Everything that I'm doing is really helping the look of the painting, and I'm really glad that I didn't just give up on it when it wasn't going my way at the start. When I'm adding liquid to it, I just draw a line and go over everything with a medium-ish dark layer to give it more of an opaque appearance. I also add just a little bit of a detail to the top of the waterline. There's some really cool refraction-y type stuff that happens there. So next time you paint water or liquid, take a closer look at that area to just get your painting looking really nice. You may think we're done, but I've got one more trick up my sleeve, gold leaf. It's pretty minimal on this bottle, but there are like 2 little spots with a gold outline. Gold leaf is pretty easy to learn, and it can be applied to pretty much any surface. I'm actually using fake gold leaf here because it's just a lot cheaper. What you do is you add some size or glue to where you want the gold leaf, then you just layer your gold leaf on. Once it's dry, just brush off the excess, and I like to use a little X-Acto to clean up over the edges a little bit. I had my ceiling fan on for the watercolor to dry quicker, also because it's summer in Texas, but I realized halfway through that gold leaf kind of likes to blow away, so do this in a place with no moving air or else you will be really frustrated. I'm really happy with how it turned out, glad I took the extra step to add the gold leaf on there, so I think I've fussed with it enough though. It's time to give it a signature and cut it out of the block. Everyone always gives me a hard time about my signature for some reason. I really don't understand why, and I think it's cool. So if you also want to give me a hard time, leave a comment. I promise I will stay up all night crying over it. Taking a painting like this out of the block is always the scariest thing to me because you can easily tear it if you're not careful, but I've learned to use the butt end of your smallest paintbrush like I'm doing here, and that will help a lot to get it out. And there we have it. Yay! Super happy with it and super happy to be done with it. Let me know in the comments how you think it turned out, and be sure to follow us, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And if you have a bottle that you want to see painted like this, let me know in the comments and give me some inspiration for the next round. Thanks for watching. See y'all on the next one.